The stage was set for one of the most anticipated congressional hearings of the year. Reporters filled every seat in the press gallery, cameras were rolling live across multiple networks, and the air was thick with tension. It wasn't just another ordinary oversight hearing, this was personal. Senator Tim Scott had been building up his criticisms for weeks, blasting Representative Jasmine Crockett on television, in op-eds, and on the campaign trail. Their ideological clash had become a headline-making feud, and now, fate had arranged that both of them would sit across from each other, under the bright, unrelenting lights of Washington, D.C. As the chairman banged the gavel, silence fell. Tim Scott leaned forward, adjusting his microphone. His expression was calm but steely, his eyes locked on Crockett like a boxer eyeing his opponent before the first bell. Representative Crockett, he began, his tone deliberate, for far too long, this committee has been hijacked by partisanship, name-calling, and a refusal to engage with facts. And frankly, I think you embody everything that's wrong with the state of our politics. Gasps rippled through the room. Crockett, sitting tall in her seat, didn't flinch. She folded her hands calmly, as though she had been expecting this exact ambush. Scott continued, his voice gaining momentum. You've made a career out of insults. You undermine the seriousness of our institution with your theatrics. The American people deserve better than soundbites and disrespect. A few members of his party nodded approvingly. His words were sharp, designed to cut deep, to corner Crockett into silence or stumble. But Crockett was anything but ordinary. She had faced courtroom battles, relentless attacks, and relentless media scrutiny. If Tim Scott thought he could shake her, he was gravely mistaken. She leaned toward her microphone, her eyes narrowing with precision. Senator Scott, she said smoothly, her voice resonating through the chamber, it's funny you bring up theatrics, because I just watched you put on quite the performance. The audience chuckled softly. Scott's jaw tightened. You talk about partisanship, but what I hear from you isn't about the American people, it's about posturing for cameras. You say I undermine this institution, but Senator, the real danger to democracy isn't plain speech, it's silence in the face of injustice. And on that, you've been silent far too many times. The room erupted in murmurs. Crockett's words had pierced like a spear, and Scott was visibly rattled. Still, he pressed on, determined not to lose ground. You think you can hide behind fiery speeches, he shot back, but the truth is, Americans are tired of leaders who divide us instead of bringing us together. Crockett didn't miss a beat. Divide us? She asked, raising an eyebrow. Let's talk about division. Division is when leaders pretend that calling out hypocrisy is the same thing as creating it. Division is when truth-tellers get labeled as troublemakers. I don't divide, Senator. I reveal. And maybe the reason you're so uncomfortable right now is because the truth has a way of making people squirm. Gasps and scattered applause filled the chamber. Reporters, pens scratched furiously, knowing they were witnessing the viral moment of the day. Scott tried to interject, but Crockett raised her hand slightly, commanding the room without asking permission. You want to talk about facts? Here are some facts, she said firmly. Fact. Millions of Americans are struggling to pay rent while billionaires pay less in taxes than their secretaries. Fact. Healthcare is still out of reach for too many families. Fact. We spend more time in these hearings scoring political points than solving problems. So don't lecture me about facts, Senator. The people outside this chamber are living them every single day. The audience was transfixed. Even those who had come in ready to dismiss her now leaned forward, caught up in her fiery clarity. Tim Scott sat back in his chair, momentarily at a loss. He had prepared for a sparring match, but he hadn't expected to get completely outmaneuvered. Crockett leaned in one last time, her voice dropping into a cool, razor-sharp tone. And let me be very clear, I didn't come here to be polite. I came here to tell the truth. If that makes you uncomfortable, then maybe it's not me who's the problem. The silence that followed was electric. Scott's lips parted as if to respond, but no words came. For the first time in a long while, he looked utterly speechless. The gavel struck again, but it was too late, the moment had already gone viral. The chamber still buzzed with the aftershocks of Crockett's fiery rebuttal. Reporters whispered frantically into their phones, camera operators zoomed in on her confident expression, and even some of Tim Scott's allies shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Scott finally found his voice. He adjusted his tie, trying to reassert control. Representative Crockett, he said slowly, you seem to believe that passion equals progress. But shouting louder doesn't make you right. What America needs is not more anger, it needs leadership. Crockett's lips curved into a knowing smile. She leaned toward the mic, her voice calm, deliberate. Senator, you confuse passion with anger because you've never had to raise your voice just to be heard. Leadership isn't about who can sound the calmest in a cushioned chair, it's about who's willing to stand up when silence is easier. Leadership means fighting for people who don't get a microphone in this chamber. So yes, my voice is loud. But it's loud for those who've been silenced for generations. The audience murmured in agreement. A young congressional aide sitting behind Crockett clenched his fist discreetly in solidarity. Scott attempted to steer the conversation back to policy. Then tell me this, he challenged, what exactly have your theatrics achieved for the working families you claim to represent? Crockett's reply came like a hammer. Since you asked, those theatrics you mock have pushed stalled legislation into the headlines. They've forced conversations that your colleagues would rather avoid. They've turned what you call a performance into pressure, and pressure makes this place move. So if results mean shaking the dust off this chamber, I'll gladly keep performing. Her words landed with weight, each syllable deliberate. The chamber had shifted. What began as Scott's attack had turned into Crockett's stage. Across social media, clips of the exchange began spreading like wildfire. Hashtags with her name trended within minutes, while pundits scrambled to frame the clash as either a meltdown or a masterclass in courage. But Crockett wasn't finished. She turned slightly, addressing not just Scott, but the room, and the millions watching live. This isn't about me versus Senator Scott, she declared. This is about the choice we all face, to be comfortable with half-truths, or to demand the whole truth. To settle for empty speeches, or to demand bold action. I'm not here to trade insults, I'm here to remind you that democracy doesn't work unless we do. A wave of applause broke out from the audience, unusual for such hearings, but impossible to suppress. Scott exhaled sharply, realizing any further attack would only amplify her momentum. He leaned back, folding his arms, his silence betraying his frustration. For Crockett, the victory wasn't just in silencing her opponent. It was in showing every American watching that courage still had a place in politics. The chair banged the gavel again, attempting to restore order. Members, please, the chairman urged, though his own eyes betrayed a flicker of admiration for Crockett's resolve. As the hearing moved on, Scott sat in tense quiet, his earlier confidence cracked. Meanwhile, Crockett's phone lit up on the desk with messages of support, her staff whispering updates of trending headlines. By the time the gavel struck to close the session, the narrative was sealed. Tim Scott had come prepared to embarrass Jasmine Crockett. But instead, it was Crockett's epic clapback that left him speechless, and made history in the process.